Hey guys, it's Kevin and my review for the latest new limited series from Amazon, of course being the Underground Railroad. So what the Underground Railroad is essentially about is basically we center on two characters. We have Cora and Caesar, and these are two black people that have been in slavery for a long time. They've had a long period of just constant suffering and just constant labor, and it gets to a point where a key event happens and they just grow sick of it. So Caesar entertains the idea that they are going to run away to this place called the Underground Railroad. However, in a twist, in a fantastical twist, this Underground Railroad is literally a railroad built as a train with a bunch of workers and things like that, which is essentially meant to be a vehicle that will take both of them to a safe haven. So basically, after some convincing, Cora does agree to go on this train with him. So they go on to this, and basically the rest of the show is watching their journey, seeing if they're able to overcome the obstacles that get in their way and finally get that freedom and peace, and also just sense of solace that they really are searching for, no matter how perilous this journey may be. So the Underground Railroad overall, I was very excited for this show. I mean, for a couple reasons. One, I think this is, Amazon in general, at least lately, has really been killing it in terms of television. I think they have just been on such a high with The Boys, Invincible, a bunch of other projects. I mean, they have just been so consistent in terms of TV, and this to me seemed like another one that could really take them somewhere, that could really be something special. But also the fact that Barry Jenkins was very heavily involved with it. Barry Jenkins is someone that I've been following throughout the past few years. I think that he is such a talented and such a specific kind of director that is someone that could really take on sensitive material like this and turn it into something of his own. But I still was a little bit worried because after the show Them on Amazon, which I'm not going to lie, was a lot more style than substance, and a lot of the time did very much feel like it was made more to gauge a reaction out of people than actually have a legitimate impact and say something different. I wasn't sure how this show was going to turn out. I was hoping that it could be something really great. So having finally seen the show, I can say that this show absolutely blew me away. I mean, look, this show, yes, it definitely can be very painful to watch at first, but it also is one of the most unique and different approaches to a slavery narrative that I have seen in quite a bit, that really is a lot more human of a show than you really would expect it to be. And it's easily one of the best shows I have seen in a long time. But we're just getting to right now, starting off with the cast. And easily, that is one of the best aspects of this entire show. I mean, something that Barry Jenkins has always done so well is that he is someone that casts 100% based on talent. He does not cast just based on star recognition. Yes, he definitely puts some big-name actors in there, but that's never been, like, his focus. His focus is getting the right talent to fit these roles, and gratefully, with the Underground Railroad, he continues to do that. A lot of the actors here are not that well known, but I feel like after the show, they're definitely going to be. Specifically, Thuso Mbedu, who absolutely blew me away in this role. I mean, her performance in this show has to be one of the most emotionally heartbreaking ones that I have seen in quite a bit, because the character of Cora is one that has dealt with a lot of suffering throughout her life, and through doing so, she's become very cynical. It's really hardened her. She hardly ever smiles in the show. Even when things seem to be going all right for her, she doesn't really seem like she is feeling that same joy. She's almost taken aback by it and has this constant frown on her face just because of how tragic her life has really been. But she also is one that really hasn't felt a lot of love within her life. And Mbedu does a really great job of representing this throughout the show, but also showing Cora's journey as a character. The way that throughout the show she becomes more and more increasingly frustrated with the way things are going down. The fact that she knows she has to do something about it, and how she goes from someone that is prone to dealing with a lot of this emotional turmoil and a lot of the racism that's thrown at her, to someone that actively wants to put a stop to it. And I think she does a really excellent job with that here. It's a very challenging performance, but what particularly struck me with her performance in this show is really something that I think she did a great job with, and that is her actual reaction. I think that's what really surprised me, is how good she is when it comes to her facial reaction in this show. I mean, this is one of those performances where all you need to do is look at her face and you can tell every single second of what Korra is feeling. You can tell all of the suffering she's been through. You can see how much this has hurt her as a character, and she just did such an incredible job with that. She does have some really juicy monologues, but again, it really is such a emotional performance in that way, and the visceral reaction that she had, it's just absolutely unparalleled. And I think after this show, I know that she's a big actress in like South Africa, but obviously I haven't seen a lot of her projects, but after this, I really want to see her in more stuff as soon as possible, because she is incredibly talented. She's someone that gave such a layered performance. It's not an easy performance to do at all, but she killed every single second of it, and I loved what she ended up doing here. She was just absolutely phenomenal throughout the show, and definitely one of the reasons why I think you should check out the show. The show's worth watching alone just to see her performance, which, I mean, if there is any good within the Emmys or within any sort of awards out there, she absolutely should be up in the running when it comes to Best Actress in a Limited Series. There is no reason she shouldn't be in there. She carries this entire show. She's someone that gets better and better as it went on, and I just loved everything about her in this role. She was just absolutely remarkable here. The other great performance, though, in the show is Joel Edgerton, who, look, Joel Edgerton's an actor that I know is very talented. I know he's someone that, is able to really transform himself into a character and really showcase a lot of the emotionally, complex emotion and complexity of a role. But the character of Ridgway is one that I think is very hard to play, because this is a guy that is completely despicable, and he's completely heartless in that way. I mean, you just absolutely hate this guy, but you have to do it in such a way where he doesn't feel cartoony. And the way that Edgerton goes about it, it's one of the best portrayals of a slave catcher that I think I've ever seen. I mean, the way that Edgerton goes about this role, you understand that in his mind, he doesn't feel that he is in the wrong. He feels that this is how he's supposed to go about this. And obviously not the case at all. I mean, this is a vile and disgusting man, but Edgerton really sinks his teeth into this role. He has some really great monologues, but you also, again, just see how relentless he is in going after Korra. Even if he doesn't really need to be the one doing it, he feels it is his duty to go after her, and Edgerton really does an amazing job in the show, particularly in the 6th episode. I loved every second of what he was doing. When we start to dive deeper into who Ridgway is as a character, I mean, that really gives Edgerton a chance to soar, and I think it's absolutely one of his best performances to date. I really loved what he ended up doing in the show. Like I said, it's a very hard role to pull off, but he really excels at basically everything that he's doing. Just amazing performance from him for sure, and I really hope that it also gets the awards attention and continues to show that Edgerton is just one of the best out there. I really love what he ended up doing in this show. Now, as far as the rest of the cast goes, I think everyone does do a really strong job here. Someone that I really hope we see more of is Chase W. Dillon. Now, he plays this character Homer, and Homer is this black child that essentially has been conditioned to think that every black person is scum, every black person is someone that should be treated like a slave and things like that. And so he's someone that, yeah, you really do find yourself hating as well, but you also do get the sense that Homer feels this is the only way of thinking. He's been kind of brainwashed into thinking this, and I think that's something that Dillon did a really great job with, especially considering that Homer does not really talk a lot. He is pretty silent throughout the majority of the show, but again, it's one of those performances where you feel every single second of what he's doing, but you also are absolutely terrified of him. And I don't know how to really describe it, but just something about this character, the way that he's constantly lurking, the facial expressions that he has. I mean, you are just so tense when it comes to this character. You are so on edge whenever this character arrives, and I think he just did a great job. It's probably one of the most impressive child performances I've seen in quite a bit, and again, I really do hope we get to see more of him because he just absolutely killed it here. Aaron Pierre, who plays Caesar, is really great too. I really did love his performance throughout the show. William Jackson Harper, I've seen him in a lot of things before, but I don't think he's ever played a role quite like this. This is definitely, obviously, a far more serious role for him, but the role that he plays in the show, he just does such a great job with, and I loved what he ended up doing here. Lily Rabe has a smaller role, and she does a really good job. I mean, really just this entire cast, I don't think there is a single weak link in this entire ensemble. I think everyone just... I think everyone just played their roles to the fullest. I think everyone just did such a great job embodying these characters, showcasing the layers that they have, whether good or bad. They do such an incredible job with really transforming into these characters, and it ends up rounding out one of the most impressive and consistent ensembles that I've seen in any show this year. I loved everything about the cast here. All right, but now let's get into the directing and the writing, which, oh my god, the directing. I just gotta jump into it right now. Something that I always get frustrated with in shows is that you will have these big name directors or writers, whatever they be, attached to these shows, and you think, okay, for example, you know, you have a show like Under the Dome, for example, and you think that show is entirely Steven Spielberg's. They've been promoting that Spielberg is heavily involved with it. They've been promoting that this is something that he himself is very much behind, but it turns out he's just an executive producer. And this has happened with a lot of countless shows, and it always annoys me because it feels like these are great filmmakers and yet they're being held back. They don't have the control of the show, and I'm very happy to say that is not the case with the Underground Railroad. This is Barry Jenkins' show through and through, and thank God it is, because what he's able to do directing-wise in the show is absolutely incredible. Because I will say right off the bat, I mean, there's gonna be a lot of people that look at this show and are completely turned off by it, and I do understand that because there's recently been an exposure to, you know, black trauma and things like that. I know a lot of people are saying that it's just very uncomfortable. They're very over this kind of narrative. But trust me when I say Jenkins is really trying to do something different here. Because yes, there are many moments in the show that are uncomfortable to watch. There are many moments in the show that are going to draw some emotions out of you that for some might hit a little too close to home. But what he's really trying to go for here is a sense of hope. When you are able to strip all of that away, underneath the surface, there is this sense of hope. There is this sense of humanity to it, and I think Jenkins does such a great job with that. And again, he does it in a very subtle manner. You don't realize at first what he's really trying to go for with the show, but as you dive deeper into it, you really do start to see what he's trying to go for here. It's all about the hope that these characters need to have. You know, there are many moments where these characters feel like they're finally in a place where things are getting better, but yet things start, you know, similar occurrences start to appear when it comes to the way that the white people are treating these characters. You know, you really do see how much that is bothering them and how much they really are feeling dehumanized in that way. Jenkins really wants to show the humanity that is in all of these characters, and I think it's just there's something that is kind of beautiful when it comes to his directing in the show. You can tell that he's trying to go for something here. You can see how passionate he is when it comes to the show, and that's something that Jenkins has just always done an amazing job with. He's found ways for every single piece of media he's done to find the beauty within tragic situations, and he absolutely does that when it comes to this show, and I really loved the way he ended up directing it. It's very meticulously done, and I think after the show, I mean, he is definitely established him as a true auteur when it comes to cinema. I mean, I love everything that he's doing, and he's just one of those directors, like, no matter what he does, I will be there for it. And with the Underground Railroad, he really just proves that he can do pretty much anything, and I can't wait to see what he's going to do next, and I'm so happy that he was granted that full control that I feel like a lot of the time, these great writers and directors aren't given. He was given full access, and it really did pay off in the end. And I hope moving forward that they're able to see the work that Jenkins did in this show, how much time he put into it, and they're able to realize, like, yeah, we shouldn't hold back these guys, and I hope that definitely is able to change things up a bit, but I absolutely loved his directing here. Now, the writing in the show, again, that's something that is very interesting, because what I think the show does a really great job with, aside from the fact that, again, there's this palpable sense of hope throughout this entire show, is the way it goes about this story. I mean, in a way, this is a very episodic show. And I've seen a lot of people say, like, oh, is there going to be a season 2 and things like that? And I can't for the life of me understand why you would really want one with the way this story is told. I mean, there's a lot of moments in the show where we're just going to different locations, because a lot of the show is Cora and or Caesar on the run, and them going to this location that at first feels like a safe haven. It feels like this is a place where they can feel loved and accepted, but there always is some form of darkness looming. There always is a sense of racism that is looming, and sometimes it's obvious, and sometimes it's really subtle. And I thought that was a really brilliant choice, because what the show really is trying to get at is that just because you've run away from slavery, it doesn't mean you fully ran away from racism. And this can be very hard for our characters. There are many times where Cora as a character just wants to give up. She doesn't want to go on this journey anymore. She wants to just kind of go back to the way things were, because as bad as it was, it's easier than what she's dealing with now in some of these locations. And that really does show just how tumultuous of a journey it is for these characters, and just how heartbreaking of a journey it really is for a lot of them. And I think they definitely did do a really good job at showcasing that, but it also is a lot of the themes of this show. Another big theme is the idea of self-love, which Cora doesn't really have. You know, this is someone who was born into slavery, but she also has a lot of resentment towards her mother. Her mother was also a runaway slave. She never came back from her, so she's always grown up thinking her mother didn't love her, and throughout the show, Cora feels that she herself is incapable of love, and this is something that we really latch onto with this character, because we want Cora to realize that, you know, there is love out there. There is someone out there that's going to care for her. She is, you know, she does deserve the love. She does deserve the care that she hasn't had within her life. And again, it makes us like her that much more as a character. And I think they overall did a really strong job with that. And like I said before, the way the show does tackle slavery, but also racism, is going to be a little too much for some people. But I think they absolutely needed to do that. They needed to show just how disgusting some of these characters are, how characters like Cora never really get to catch a break, so we can really see how she's able to eventually overcome that, how she's going to realize that she needs to try to overcome that. She needs to do what she can to fight back. It makes us want her that much more to fight back against all of the disgusting occurrences that, you know, end up happening. One in episode 1, especially, when she's in slavery with Caesar, is so hard to watch, and this show really doesn't hold back in that way, but I honestly feel like they needed to show it. They needed to show it because you need to see what is pushing Cora to her breaking point. When is the moment where she is just gonna go off on this journey and recognize that she needs to get away from this and she needs to find some sense of, something better. There has to be something better, and that's what's always that's basically her entire goal in the show, is that there has to be something better than where she is. And I think that's something that they did a very good job within this show. You're always hoping that they're going to find something better, but you're unsure if they're really going to be able to do that. And I think, again, that's something that this show just did a really good job with showcasing. But the characters in this show as well, again, is something that really stuck out to me, because something that I think, again, going back to them, and I don't want to constantly compare these two things, but if you guys remember, a big problem with that show for me is that while I like some of the characters, I felt there was only one specific element that tied us to them. And with the Underground Railroad, that's not the case at all. All of these characters are very multifaceted. They're very layered. There's a lot that they have gone through. There's a lot of backstory with these characters. I already mentioned how good Cora is, but then you look at someone like Caesar, for example. I mean, this is someone who is actually very articulate to the point where he can read, he can write. He goes against a lot of what slaves are supposed to stand for. And so you can see why he wants to get out of this as soon as possible, because he already knows that he is breaking the rules. He doesn't feel like he fits in anymore, and he wants to get away from all of the atrocities that are happening, and that really latches you on to that character because you want to know more about him. You want him to be able to, gain the success that he knows that he's capable of getting. You want him to be able to do that, even if it seems impossible for him to do that. I think that's something that, they did a really great job of when it came to that character, or various other characters that Cora comes upon in this show. Every single one of them leaves an impact on you. I don't think there was a single character in the show that I felt, oh, that's too similar to this character. And that's something that I really did appreciate. Every single one of these characters has a story. They have a reason for why they feel the way that they do. They have a reason for why they survived, how they got there. They're all dived into really well. You have a character like Royal, for example, William Jackson Harper's character, and there's a big contrast between him and Cora, because this is someone that, while Cora was born to slavery, he's someone that's pretty much been free all of his life, and so you get to dive a little bit deeper into his perspective on things. And every single one of them, they not only enlighten us, but they enlighten Cora as a character, because it shows her that there are black people out there that aren't suffering as much. There are black people out there that are able to overcome it. And yes, they've dealt with trauma before. They've seen things happen, but they are able to overcome it. But what they don't have, again, is the awareness that Cora really does. And and that gives both us a reason to root for them, but also gives Cora more reasons to become motivated, to overcome a lot of the darkness within her life. And I think they do a really good job with that. However, even the worst characters in this show, the most inhumane characters possible, like Ridgway, for example, he actually has a backstory. And going back to them, again, I don't like to compare it, but something I mentioned when I was reviewing that show is that a lot of the villainous characters felt cartoony to me. They didn't feel like they had much of a character to them, and Ridgway is exactly the kind of character that I wanted. Exactly the kind of character. And Ridgway is exactly the kind of character that I wanted in that show, because yes, this guy is utterly disgusting. This guy is completely inhumane. Everything that he does is so repulsive. He gets off at the fact that he is catching these slaves. That's basically his main motivation. within life. There really are no lines that he will not cross in order to make sure that these slaves are in his possession. But underneath all of that, you get to see just how broken this guy really is and what really made him this way. And it made him a better character as a result. And I want to make it clear, they are not in any way trying to make you sympathize with this character. What they're really just trying to do is get us to understand why he is this way. Why is Ridgway so disgusted towards, black people? Why does he have this desire to go after them? You really do get to see that throughout the show, and that's something that was very impressive to me, because they easily could have just written him as, oh, he's just a slave catcher and he's a horrible person, but they get to show you why he is such a horrible person, why he became this way, why does he feel the way he does, and it makes him that much better of a character as a result. I honestly was surprised by how invested I was in his character. You want him to suffer, you want him to lose, and finding out more about why he is this way, it makes you want him to lose that much more, and I think they did a really great job with that overall. And then Homer as well as a character, this isn't just like the sidekick to Ridgway. No, these two have sort of a son and father and son relationship. You see Ridgway's really taken him under his wing, and he's brainwash him into thinking these things, that, his own race is scum, he should be ashamed of the fact that he's black, and you feel bad for Homer, but again, you also really hate this character because of what he's doing, because he is going after his own kind, and obviously he's a kid, he doesn't fully understand what he's doing, but it really doesn't change the fact that Homer is still a very villainous presence on this show, and again, deepening the layers of that character made him that much more villainous. So that's what really impressed me. I think the characters are so well written in this show, and again, it really is about the humanity in all of them. That's something that Jenkins is really trying to drive at, is why do they feel this way? What is their reasoning for doing these things? That's something that he really wants to kind of linger on, and that's something that I really did appreciate when it came to this show in terms of the writing. But there are other aspects of the show that I think work really well when it comes to black culture. I think there's a lot of things that can still relate, that still very much do relate to today. The resilience that a lot of these characters have, but also the awareness that they're never really done fighting. There really isn't a second where these characters aren't done fighting, aren't worried that something is going to get in their way. Cora especially is increasingly worried of that, and I think that's something else that... But again, the themes of this show, aside from just pushing through all of the pain that these characters go through, again, it really, I think, is about hope, but it's also very much about family and a sense of belonging. Cora is a character who feels disconnected from pretty much anyone she comes upon, but she really does learn throughout the show that she is capable of that love. She is capable of that, and that's something that I think the show really does stand for, and that's something that makes it really beautiful overall. And again, among all of the tragedy, all of the inhumane, acts that you see throughout the show that these white people commit, there's a sense of humanity. There is a sense of hope that I think just really is going to connect with a lot of people in this show, and that's something that I overall really, really did impress me within the show overall. But then the Underground Railroad element of the show, that's a very fantastical element, but it's one that works really well here because it represents, again, a sense of escape. It represents a sense of hope that these characters really do have, and the way the world building of this train and the conductors and all the people that reside within it, I think is really well done, and I thought they did a really good job with incorporating that. There's a lot of elements in this show that I think you can watch back and you're not sure what's real and what's not, and I thought it just made the show that much more intriguing overall, because you don't actually know if what's happening is happening. And there are many moments throughout the show where you'll often feel like, okay, this is where things are going to be calmer, things are going to be better here, and then something happens that absolutely ruins it. Something happens that absolutely you know, it brings all of that to a permanent stop. All of this sense of peace, this sense of solace, you know, suddenly everything comes to a halt in that way. And the best example is in episode 9, which is one of the best episodes of television I have seen in such a long time. But there is an act that takes place in that episode, and I was literally speechless by the time it ended. I mean, it angered me, it affected me, it saddened me, just all the emotions that you can think of. And again, it really is due to how well they do a good job of taking their time and getting you to connect with all of these characters. I don't think there's a single one within the show that I didn't feel somewhat of an attachment to, that I didn't feel like I wanted them to succeed or I wanted them to fail. There's no character in the show I didn't have an opinion on, and it really is due to just how well the writing is here. They do such an excellent job with that, and that is definitely one of the best elements throughout this entire show. There are even episodes that episodes 4 and 7 are single character focused episodes, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but I have seen a lot of people say that these episodes could have been taken out of the show and nothing would be left. But I actually feel differently. I think these 2 episodes are very important because they help us better understand some of the key characters of the show, and also gives us a new perspective on things. And I really did appreciate the way that they went about that overall. So I think that the writing in the show is just absolutely superb. It is one of the most consistent elements and some of the most impressive writing I've seen in a show like this in quite a bit. Like I said, there's a lot of things that may seem like familiar territory when it comes to the slavery elements, but what this show is really trying to get at is very different than a lot of shows, is much different than what you really are expecting. There's a lot more it has to say than just, oh, let's escape slavery. It's a lot more than that. It goes far beyond just that surface level of a message, and that's something I just really end up appreciating about the show at the end of the day. And I think a big part of the show, and something that a lot of people are going to latch onto, is the idea that racism is never going to really go away. It's institutionalized. It's something that follows a bunch of characters, and you really do see the different types that there are. Like I said, some of it is very subtle, and some of it is very overt, and some of it is very much in your face in that way. But that's something I really did appreciate about the show, is that they are willing to dive into different types of racism overall. That gives you a better understanding of what these characters really do have to go through overall, and I really did appreciate that. But getting into the cinematography for this show, I mean, that is another thing that really sticks out. I feel like we are at a point in the TV landscape where things are starting to feel more and more cinematic, and honestly, the Underground Railroad might be the best example I've seen of that yet, because the cinematography of the show is outstanding. The way that they're able to paint this picture so viscerally, you know, make you feel like you're in that period of the 1800s is so well done. But it also has a very, like, sort of ethereal feeling. It's kind of hard to put it into words, but everything just feels so visceral. All the locations and things like that, they do a really great job with. There are some really memorable shots throughout the show, and just in terms of cinematography, it's an absolute work of art, and I loved pretty much everything about it. The score by Nicholas Britell, though, I mean, I've said it before, most of the time when Nicholas Britell is composing something, it's going to be really fucking good, but I truly do think he's at his best when he's working with Barry Jenkins, because, you know, I was really loving his work in If Beale Street Could Talk, but the score he does for the Underground Railroad might just be his best yet. I mean, it's so powerful and memorable. It really gives the show like an epic feel of sorts, and if there's one thing I can say when it comes to the show is I don't think you're going to be able to get the main theme of the show out of your head for a while. It's one I've been going back to constantly. There are so many moments in terms of the score, and it does such a great job of just really heightening a scene, making it very powerful, adding to that feel. I thought he just did such an incredible job with that, and I loved pretty much everything that he was doing here score-wise. And Bertel really just, again, further shows that he is absolutely one of the best composers working today. And, you know, really no different here. Something some people might have an issue with is the soundtrack in this show. Now, the soundtrack, what I'm really talking about is the end credits. Every single episode ends with some sort of R&B or rap or pop song that will play after the episode, and I thought it was effective because essentially what it's trying to do is it is trying to summarize what just happened in a modern context. And I think this was also Barry Jenkins' way of showing that, like, this is still very similar to things that happen today, and here's a song to kind of relate to that. So I thought it worked. I can see some people taking issue with it, but I thought it was effective. I really liked a lot of the needle drops that he chose here. I've seen some shows try to pull off what it did, and it didn't work, but for this show, I think they really did a great job with it. I don't think it lessened the impact that the episode had at all. I think, again, it was really just underscoring what you just watched and kind of giving you, again, a modern relation to it that I thought they did a really good job with. Let's talk about the editing in this show, because if I had to have one gripe in terms of not the show, but the release of the show, it pertains to the editing. Almost every single episode of this show is over an hour long. The 9th episode being the longest, it's almost movie length, which it absolutely needs to be. Every single episode, I think, is the perfect length. I don't think there's an episode this season that ran too long for me. I found that every episode worked with the runtime that it did because it was that much more impactful. So I like the fact that a lot of these episodes were really long, that they were given a lot of time to flesh out these stories, because like I said, sometimes the show can feel very episodic, so they need to pack a lot into one episode, and it never feels overstuffed. It never feels like there's too much going on. I think the show is overall just really well paced, and I was definitely really happy with the way it turned out. My problem is I don't think this show should have ever been released all at once, because this is not a show to binge. Not just because of how heavy it is, how emotionally taxing it can be. This is going to be a long watch. When you watch The Underground Railroad, you need to understand that the majority of these episodes are over an hour long. And I don't just mean like an hour and 3 minutes. Like, some of them clock in at like an hour and 12 minutes. And so I just don't think this is a show that is made for binging. I think this is a show that's made to watch in small chunks rather than all at once. Maybe you guys feel differently, but for me, this is not a show I would recommend to binge. I think Amazon should have absolutely taken the Boys or Invincible route with this show and just release it weekly. I think it would have made far more sense to do that. And the fact that they didn't is a very puzzling decision for me, because again, I think that the show, while it is impactful, I think it's even more impactful if you take your time with it. I think as we see, like, say, Apple TV Plus and Disney Plus, you know, using the weekly model and it continues to work, I'm just further championing it, and I think that The Underground Railroad would have been a show that, again, while it is getting a lot of hype, while I do see people talking about it, I think it would be getting even more so if they release these weekly instead of all at once. I think it just would have been a lot more impactful that way. But again, editing-wise, I think the show is really well done. I think that the episode lengths, nothing really ever dragged for me, so I really don't have too many issues with the show. I will say, if there was one issue I did have, it really is just kind of a small gripe. The only thing that does bring down the show for me is in the 7th episode, there is a character that episode is based upon, and it was a really strong episode. It's also the shortest episode of the show, only being 20 minutes long, and I really do like that episode a lot, but if I'm being honest, I don't really feel like it amounted to much, because it was kind of hinting at something that was going to happen, and then it didn't happen. I love what happened in that episode. I thought it was very satisfying for the character that it was centered around, but I was hoping something would happen, and it just didn't, and I think it would have, again, been a little bit more impactful if it did. But again, that's really the only thing I think that brings the show down for me. All right, so now that I've talked about everything I love the show, without delving into spoilers, now we are going to get into spoilers, which there's a lot to talk about here. A lot really does go down in this show. There's a lot to really get into. I think the first thing to really talk about is Cora and Caesar. The first episode leads you to believe that these are the two main characters of the show. We're going to be following Cora and Caesar throughout the show, and I think they did a really good job of setting up that whole relationship, but also setting up who Caesar was as a character, you know, with him being a little bit more articulate, but also maybe being homosexual as well. It's pretty clear that he's not really into women in that way. They kind of like subtly hint at it, which I thought was interesting. And then, of course, you know, they watch that slave being whipped and burnt to death, which, oh my god, that sequence. I can understand if some people stop watching the show because of that. I can. I think you should absolutely continue, but I'm not gonna lie, if people stopped watching the show after that sequence because it was too much for them, I totally understand it because, whoa, I was not expecting them to do that. I love that they did that because it, again, showed the reactions out of Cora and Caesar, and it gave us a visceral representation of how they're really feeling in that given moment. It helps zero in on those two characters. But again, I can understand if people took issue with it. But, you know, once they get into this town where they think everything's great, you think that maybe they're going to be able to, you know, have some time, you know, when they're in South Carolina and it, you know, it's an area that's nice to black people and things like that. Everything seems to be okay. You realize that something is off. You know, there's no black children for some reason, and we realize what's actually going on. And that was one of the forms of racism that I thought they did a really good job with, is very subtle bits of racism where, again, at first it seems like all of these people are treating, you know, black people as one. They're treating them like they should. They're getting jobs. Cora is, you know, learning to read. She is getting the proper education that she should and things like that. But then you realize, oh, wait, no, there's something off here because they're constantly asking Cora to go to the hospital and things like that. Turns out they're making it so women can no longer have babies, and they're poisoning all of the men with these vitamins that that Caesar was actually helping distribute. He didn't realize that he was doing it, but they're poisoning them. And yeah, I mean, that whole thing was so fucked up. I really liked that they went in like a horrific direction with that. I thought that was really cool overall. But again, that was one of the things I think this show just did a really great job with, is like different forms of racism. But the bigger part of it is that after this episode, Caesar disappears. He gets away. He lets Cora get away and basically lures himself over, basically gives himself over to Ridgway. Ridgway ends up catching him, and we don't know what's happened to Caesar. And I was wondering, like, are we going to see him again? I thought they were going to leave it where we didn't know what ended up happening. But then, of course, we do find out when basically Ridgway, in a drunken stupor, tells Cora that Caesar was ripped apart by this crowd. You know, basically it turned out that they found out what Cora and Caesar did, which I did leave out of the review because I think it's a big spoiler that there was this guy that was working on the plantation, and he tried to, he tried to go after Cora and Caesar, and Cora ended up stabbing him, and it seemed, she ended up hitting him over the head with that bottle, and it seems like he's pretty much dead. So now Ridgway not only is trying to, persuade people, and I thought this was a good narrative choice because it, again, heightens it heightens the stakes when it comes to Ridgway. You realize that he's not just catching a runaway slave, he's catching a runaway slave that to him is this murderer, because she murdered a white man, and obviously, if that happens, people are going to look at that more than just her being a runaway slave. And so we see exactly what would have happened to her if she would have caught, because Caesar was ripped apart by the crowd. And oh my god, that scene was so hard to stomach. But again, it's one of those things where the show does such a great job with giving you a connection to these characters. We wanted Caesar to succeed. We wanted him to get out of this. We wanted him to become successful within his life. And the fact that he couldn't is really sad to hear, but it also motivates Cora to get out of this. She's going to try to do what he couldn't. She's going to try to succeed. And I thought they did a really good job with that overall. But again, I really like the way the show kind of misled you into thinking that these two characters were going to be the ones that we focus on, but it's really just Cora's story. And I think it honestly works better as it being just Cora's story, because we get the sense that Cora is one of the only few slaves that are going to get out of this, that are going to survive. She's going to keep fighting no matter what she does, any obstacles that get thrown her way. You can see there were moments where she wanted to give up, but then, she's captured by Ridgway, and she happens upon that one character that is literally starving himself to death and has no hope left. It actually gives her some hope that maybe there's a way to get out of this. Maybe there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and, she's going to keep running as far as she can until she can find that hope. And I really like the way they ended up doing that here. But then diving further into Ridgway, I mean, when we get to that 4th episode, I was not expecting his backstory to be the way it was. You would think that Ridgway, being this hateful, racist, just horrible man, had to, he had to grow up in like a rough household, or maybe his father was very hard on him. No, it's actually the opposite. His father was a wonderful man who basically saw the good in everyone. He believes that everyone had this great spirit and things like that. And because Ridgway didn't really believe in that, he basically convinced himself that there is no great spirit. He didn't align with his father's views, and he ended up going down this really dark path. So you get the sense that Ridgway really hasn't grown up since then. He's been stuck in, he's a grown man. He's a child in a grown man's body, pretty much. And I think when you look at it that way, it actually makes Ridgway a far more fascinating character, because while he could have taken the time to maybe look deeper into this, try to figure out why his father feels the way that he does, he's just so gung-ho about the fact that everything his father has said to him is bullshit. And also seeing the way that his father treated this black man who believed in the Great Spirit, and now he is kind of almost jealous of him because of the fact, yeah, it's extreme that just because his father, gave this love and appreciation to a black person, and Ridgway did not get that same appreciation because, again, he did not believe in the Great Spirit. He didn't really cling on to it. And I don't think his father, did anything wrong here. I think that it really was just they didn't feel the same way. And, he's not gonna get rid of that belief system. This is something that his father feels very strongly about. And you can see because of that, they're just not on the same page really ever. One of the things I love is when Ridgway eventually goes back to his father, and his father basically tells him, he doesn't say there is no great spirit. He says, I've raised you wrong. I wish that you could have turned out like me. He wishes that Ridgway could have seen the good in him. He wishes that Ridgway, he could have brought him up differently. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And the moment where he eventually, turns on all these black people, it gives you a further understanding of his character. This is now his only goal in life. This is all he's going to amount to, and it makes him that much more pathetic. And that, to me, is far more interesting than just this relentless slave catcher. Not only is he just this relentless slave catcher, that's his only goal in life. There's nothing else that he is clinging on to, because he decided to abandon any sort of connection to his father. And as a result, it's hardened him into this horrible person. And you can see why he feels so strongly about Homer, because Homer is a child. Homer is a lot younger than him. And again, Ridgway has the mind of a child in that way. So you can understand why he feels like Homer, why he feels like he is Homer's superior, because again, Homer is a child. Homer's someone that's younger than him, and he's able to sort of like manipulate him into thinking that way. And again, it makes him a better character overall. And so when we get to that 6th episode, which, may I just say, probably the finest work I've seen from Joel Edgerton, just in that episode alone. I loved everything that he ended up doing there. And, he's going on and on about like this proclamation and things like that. And how he keeps going on about that whole thing, and you think that maybe Cora is going to kill him, but she ends up not doing that. Instead, Ridgway actually kills the black man that his father was in such awe of. And again, really, really devastating moment to see that all go down. I was hoping that Ridgway would have died in that moment, but I like that they end things on the note where like Cora is going to kill him at some point. That this is going to be her goal throughout the rest of the show. And again, I think it made Ridgway that much better of a character overall. And again, the different environments that Cora ends up venturing to, whether it's that horrible place where essentially black people are illegal, anything with them is illegal, and it leads to like a genocide of black people. I mean, it doesn't get more horrific than that. And that's one of the things, again, I think the show did really well, is that you think slavery is the worst, but running away from it, it doesn't really leave you in that way. There's other forms of it, and this is perhaps the worst that we see when this woman, ends up burning down the house that Cora and Grace were in, and Grace is still presumably alive in that house, and you think that maybe she's gonna burn there. I mean, that moment just really got to me with the way they ended up going about all of that. But the other thing you really do notice is any white people that tend to help out Cora in this situation, they don't make it out of this series alive. Whether it's Will Poulter's character, who was sincere in his efforts to protect Cora and Caesar. He truly did not know of the dastardly things that town was doing, that they were drugging the men, and they were essentially making the women infertile. He didn't know that they were doing that, and now he feels terrible, but unfortunately he ends up having to pay for that. Or Lily Rabe's character, who seems like she really does want to help Cora, or Damon Harriman's character, who seems like he's gonna help get Cora to that next train, ends up getting shot by Ridgway. And again, I think what this is really trying to show is that, within the show, it's not just... I've seen some people say that, it's just trying to show that some white people aren't bad. I don't think that's what they're really getting at. I think it's the fact that, anyone that that is opposed to slavery or is opposed to this racism is not going to be able to get away from it, because it is always there. And I think that's something that this show is really trying to showcase, is that there isn't really a way to stop it. And even if you try to stop it, it's just not going to happen. And that's why Cora is the one that makes it out alive every single time, because she knows that there is no stopping this in that way. She knows that she's just going to have to learn to overcome it. And I think that's what works so well when it comes to her character. But when she eventually arrives in that one town, and it's this town where basically, black people have cultivated it. It seems to be a town where, it's all just black people living there. It's a really nice area. You can see that it's very well, it's this very tight-knit community. They're all very close to each other. And this seems like a really nice way for Cora to support herself, to be somewhere that can actually, be a paradise of sorts. But even in that, she does not feel like she belongs there. She feels like something is off. And I really love this a lot, because it highlights a couple things. One, again, it highlights that idea that this never really goes away. Wherever you go, there's danger afoot. But two, it really gets into the idea that Cora doesn't feel love because she's never really, the reason that Cora can't just kind of sit back and relax and feel this connection that Royal does, where you can see that Royal is someone that generally cares for Cora. He wants to be in a relationship with her. He generally does like her. You know, this is someone that is just treating her with the utmost respect, and it's jarring for her because she's not used to it. She's waiting for that other shoe to drop. She's so convinced that things are going to go haywire that she almost ends up leaving the town completely. And I loved that whole arc. I love the way that was done because it kind of brings you as a viewer into a false sense of security where you think, okay, maybe this is finally going to work for Cora. Maybe she's finally going to be able to overcome these odds. You know, this is a place that is going to work out for her. But you knew eventually something was going to happen. You knew eventually that she was not going to be able to live here forever because even she knows that at the end of the day, she's still considered a slave, even if she isn't one. You know, she has that moment where she's near the train station and the woman asks her, are you free or a runaway? And she generally doesn't know what category she fits into because it's all kind of the same for her. She's kind of been on this ongoing chase, and it's a really emotional moment because, again, she's recognizing that, like, yeah, I don't really know who I am. I don't really know where I fit into. And we get to episode 9, and like I said, one of the best episodes of television I've seen in so long because they do such a great job of just showing you the warmth and the love of this community and how everyone supports each other. Everyone really does want to help Cora, even when she confesses to the fact that she is a murderer of sorts and that she did murder this white guy. You can see that there are still a lot of people on her side. You have Gloria, for example, someone that is really just trying to make her feel as welcome as possible and let her know that, like, they open their arms to anyone. And I think they do, they did a really great job of showing that. Or like I said, Royal, someone who wants to pursue this relation with her. But then you have someone like Mingo, and Mingo is really the one that is just not on the right track. He is so convinced that this community is working and that it's sustainable that he doesn't really need to do anything else. You know, if he wants to expand it, he needs to cater to the white man's needs. And I think that this was a really interesting thing because even in a community that is supposed to be specifically for black people and to make them feel safe and make them feel secure in a way that no other area can, you still have this guy catering to white people. And you think that maybe he's going to get his way, but the second that he was talking to all those constituents and you could see that some of them were not on the same page, and then we also are cutting back to Ridgway and Homer and them slowly making their way towards this town, you knew something was not going to go right. And so the moment where they're in that courthouse and they're having this debate, Mingo and the other character, Mac, and they're going back and forth, Mingo's talking about, like, his experiences, and Mac's talking about his. One of them's light-skinned, one of them's dark-skinned, and so they have very different views on things. All of that was very fascinating, but you knew that something was just not going to go right there. And oh my god, when all of those soldiers appear and they just end up opening fire, and they don't even care what ends up happening. They don't care if all of them die. They don't care what ends up happening. They just keep shooting. It just... that affected me so hard because, again, they really just did a great job of showing you that maybe this is an area that could really work. But the only person who was convinced that this was not going to work, that this was not a safe area, was Cora. She knew deep down something was going to happen. She knew deep down that there was no way that that they were going to get out of this and no potential disasters happening. There's nobody out there that's going to ruin it for them. And I really love the way that whole sequence was done. And oh my god, when Royal dies, and yet another thing now on Cora's mind, another death she has witnessed, going all the way back to the slave that was burnt alive and her witnessing that, and then her having to think about Caesar dying, and now this one man, one of the only people that was generally kind to her and wanted to start a life with her, just dies right in front of her. Again, because he was naive. Again, because of the fact that he generally believed that he was free. He generally believed that he was safe there. But again, Korra knew better. Korra knew that that wasn't the case. And I think that's, again, it's really interesting the way that they went about that. But the best moment of all, of course, comes in when Ridgway gets in there and he corners Korra and, he wants her to show him to the Underground Railroad, but she goes in deep and she ends up throwing him down with her. And it's at that point where she finally decides to kill him. And it was just such a satisfying moment for the last words that he says to Homer to basically be, read this statement aloud for me. Again, it was such a good moment, the way that was handled. This was the first time that Korra was truly able to overcome an obstacle that got in her way, and you just feel so rewarded after this. And again, it's not to say that these characters that didn't make it out of the show were bad. That's not at all, I think, what the show is trying to say. I think it's trying to show that Korra was ahead of her time. She was resilient. She was very tactful in that way. She knew, again, nothing was permanent. She knew that. She knew at the end of the day, even if she felt good, nothing was permanent. And that is what gives her that cue to escape, to finally get out of this situation. And you think maybe that this is going to work for her, but I really didn't know. I really didn't know what was going to end up happening, because that's the way that the penultimate episode ends. And I really didn't know how things were going to wrap up in the finale. But again, I really love the way that whole episode went down. I really love the way that Korra was finally able to put an end to something in her life. So she knows that she can't go back to that plantation anymore because Ridgway is gone. Nobody else is looking for her. Ridgway fails, essentially. He doesn't get to fulfill that goal in his life because, again, he was so hung up on it that he didn't focus on anything else that he wanted to do, and because of that he did end up failing in the end. It's just a really powerful moment, and I love the way all of that was done. And again, I mean, this episode is masterful just based on emotions alone. You start off the episode and you're feeling really good, you're smiling, you got that scene where they're like shedding corn and things like that. It's really fun to watch, but then you feel there's darkness that's looming, and once you get to that scene where they're having that debate, you know something's going to go down. It is utterly devastating to watch, but then it becomes incredibly emotionally satisfying to watch Korra finally kill the guy that has made her life such a living hell, the guy that has constantly, done everything he can to catch her. He failed to catch her mother, and he fails to catch her. It is such a rewarding moment to see that go down, and I think that alone is what makes this one of the best episodes of television that I think I've ever seen. It's certainly one of the best I've seen in a long time, and I think the show, like I said, it's worth watching alone just for that episode. Like, if there's any episode I recommend, it's gotta be that one, because it is just absolutely incredible what they were able to achieve, and I was so stunned by the way the episode ended up wrapping up overall. But before we get to the actual finale, I do want to say, like I said before, the one thing that did disappoint me just a little bit was the Grace episode. Great episode. I love the fact that she actually did get away. She was able to get out of that fire. Not only did she get out of that fire, but she got onto the train safely, and now she essentially is headed out to a new life. I thought this was leading to her and Korra meeting up. I thought that that's what they were kind of hinting at, and I think it would have been that much more effective if we did, where we could see two different generations kind of realizing the same thing, that they finding ways to get out of these situations. I think it would have been that much more satisfying if we had a meetup between Korra and, well, now we know her as Fanny Briggs. It would have been nice if we saw that. But we didn't, and again, I like the fact that it's ambiguous, but a part of me was hoping that we would have seen her meet up with Korra in the finale, and it didn't happen, and that was just a little bit disappointing to me. But what we got in the finale, I thought was really well done. A lot of it is based around Korra's mother, Mabel, and I really loved what we got to see with her, because it really kind of changes our perception of that character. Throughout a lot of the show, we've gotten the sense that Mabel was this resentful mother. She didn't want Cora. She ran away without telling her, and we realize that it's a little bit more complicated than that. She essentially was kind of a midwife to a lot of the women that were out there. She was trying to care them in the best way that she could. A lot of them ended up having stillbirths though, and you can see that this is something that really does affect her. And when one finally ends up happening, she decides she's just going to up and leave because nobody seems to be reacting to it. Nobody seems to care that it's going on. Everyone's just very nonchalant. And that's another thing. I mean, throughout this entire show, the amount of characters that were just so nonchalant about everything that was going on, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe how inhumane and disgusting some of these characters were. But going back to Mabel, I like the fact that we realized that no, she was trying to go back for Cora. She realized at the last second that she needed to, but unfortunately she ended up dying from a snake bite. And I like that we see this generational thing for both her and Cora, where she was not able to make it out successfully. She ended up dying and did not get to actually run away. Cora is basically given the chance to finish what her mother couldn't, and it's a really beautiful story in that way, because we see that this isn't a story just about a runaway slave and her trying to escape. It's a runaway slave that was born into slavery and was thought that throughout her entire life, was nothing like her mother. She never experienced genuine love, when in reality, her mom did love her. Her mom did want her to get away. She's doing what her mother would have wanted her to do, and now she's finally given a chance to run away completely. Ridgeway's gone. She didn't have to worry about that anymore, and now she just has to worry about, what's really next. And I like that we end the show not knowing what's going to happen to Cora, not knowing what's going to happen to the other girl that she's with, Molly, the other girl from the town, which I thought they did a really great job of setting up that relation with Molly just reciting the Declaration of Independence and then seeing the connection that those two form. Again, we don't know if that guy in the wagon's actually good. We don't know. He says he is, but we don't actually know if he's a good guy. For all we know, he could be just as dastardly as the people she encountered in South Carolina. We really don't know. But what's important is the fact that, again, she just keeps fighting. She keeps fighting. She's getting away, and it's a really satisfying ending. And I know you maybe wanted something a little bit more, but I don't think they could have ended it on a better note than the two of them getting away to an unknown fate. And again, paralleling that with Mabel, who wasn't able to do that. I think, again, there's something really beautiful about that, and I think that's something that they just summed up very well here. Again, this was never a show about just slavery and about racism and about torture. Yes, it's in there, but it really is about how do we overcome it? How do we push through it? We know that it's always going to be there, so how do we find a way to overcome it? And Cora exactly has done that, and now it's just a matter of how she continues to live her life, knowing that this is out there. I think it's a really satisfying note to end things on overall. So overall, guys, the Underground Railroad, like I said, at first glance, this does seem like something that you have seen before. It definitely can get very brutal. It can be very traumatizing for a lot of people. It definitely can get very brutal. It does not hold back in any way. There's a lot of sequences that I think are really going to stick with you. And because that, it might be a little too traumatizing for some viewers. But I promise you, if you stick with this and you really give it a chance, I really do think this becomes something a lot more special than you are expecting. While definitely it covers some really heavy topics like racism and slavery, it is really a show about hope. It's a show about self-love, and it really is about learning to love yourself, learning to accept the situation and finding ways to overcome it. And I think in general, it's a very inspiring show. There's always going to be slavery shows out there, yes, but I think moving forward, this is much more of a way to tell that story. It's got truly remarkable performances from everyone involved. Thuso Mbedu especially, one of the best performances I've seen in a long time. Joel Edgerton as well gives one of the best performances of his career. It's got some top-tier writing, just masterful direction from Barry Jenkins, who really establishes himself as a true auteur of cinema, I think. Just a very memorable and epic score from Nicholas Bertel, some stunning cinematography. The Underground Railroad really does have all the makings of an incredible limited series, and I think this is one that people are going to be watching back years from now. I think this is one that people are going to be revisiting and analyzing endlessly because it really is something different. It really is trying to spark conversations, the way that it relates to modern life and things like that, and really dives in the idea that racism never really goes away. I think these are things that really make the Underground Railroad a far more unique series than you really are expecting. It's got a fantastical element to it as well that I think hasn't really been there. Overall, guys, the Underground Railroad is just one of the best things I've seen in quite a bit. It is easily the best show I've seen so far this year, and I am going to give it an A. I cannot recommend this show enough, guys. Amazon really is on a roll right now when it comes to television. I don't think there is a better network right now than Amazon that's producing the best shows, and that's why I'm a little bit worried about this MGM deal, but that's a whole different conversation. Otherwise, guys, that's it for my review of the Underground Railroad. Let me know what you guys saw of the show overall, left your thoughts in it. Please check the show out if you haven't. I cannot recommend enough, but that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoy it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.